start, Laney, could you talk a little bit about your uses of news literacy ideas in a comp class?
Well, I was going to show you a commercial, which is an Apple iPod Shut Up and Let Me Go song.
Let's show it.
Now I'm so easily out for me, gone is left. It's me that ought to be moving on. Your nose is horrible. I want something unignorable. I ain't freaking, I ain't faking this. I ain't freaking, I ain't faking this. I ain't freaking, I ain't faking this. Shut up and let me go. Hey! Shut up and let me go.
And the point is I was sort of testing Stephen Colbert's theory of truthiness, which is that people tend to feel the news and feel the information and not process the information, which is sort of based in science, and that the way evolutionary, the way our brains have developed in order to survive in the forest when we're wandering around, when we were Neanderthal, is we process information first through our emotional cortex, our emotional pathways. We need to know whether we should run or befriend the person. And then we think about it. And if we thought about it first, we'd be dead. So I was just seeing if these students were sort of still were engaging in this emotional pathway. And they were, because when I played the song, they were all like, you know. And so at the end, I just asked them, what's the main point of the message? And they all said, oh, have fun. iPods are great, get up and dance. And I was kind of stunned. And from there, that's kind of how I went into a course in just the craft of thinking. I sort of felt that students are given so much textbook material on how to, depending on what you're teaching, you know, how to write a story, how to write a lead, how to structure a story. But even some of the journals and textbooks talk about how to pursue, you know, they talk about the importance of pursuing the truth and the importance of verification, but they don't actually talk about how to then do it. So what I did for many times in the classes was break down the thought process. So I found a book called Asking the Right Questions. You know, first I got in touch with SUNY. At the time, I had never taught before, and I just would Google, like, how do you teach thinking? And stumbled across the News Literacy Center and got a lot of material from them. And then found this book called Asking the Right Questions. And it just breaks down, you know, first, what's the goal of the message, who paid for it and why. Once you can figure out what the conclusion is, what are the reasons for backing up this conclusion by an iPod? So they would break down the commercial and realize that the reasons aren't good enough. So what reasons do you need? Then they would list the reasons, like storage capacity, sound quality, price. And then they would look at, am I going on too long? I'm sorry.
No, just go, please.
And then they would go into, once they could identify the reasons, we would then look at all the tricks people would play with reasons. So I used, you know, fact check, Annenberg Classroom. They have critical thinking lesson plans. So we would look at language that's used in reasons, you know, if it's emotional reason, if it's an emotive language or cognitive. People will use language, they'll use the emotive meaning of a word, or they'll use a cognitive meaning of the word. They try and sway you emotionally to believe the message. So we would look at language. What words are unclear? What words are ambiguous? And what do you need to ask about just with the language? So we look at deceptive techniques in language. Then we would look at assumptions that people make. You know, there's always hidden logic, hidden drivers behind reasons. So they would practice learning how to identify assumptions. You know, the people will assume certain things about the way the world is or the way the world should be. So if you can identify that, you can then start to ask more questions about the reasons. There's value assumptions people have that come into conflict with other values, which is also another avenue. It's a way to play devil's advocate. If someone is arguing that we should have more nuclear power plants, they're valuing efficiency over conservation. So if you can identify the conflict, you can start asking questions and engage in a discussion rather than just accepting what they're saying. And so another thing they look at is fallacies, which is faulty logic in reasons. So, and they all have fun names, you know, like the genetic fallacy, undistributed middle, what's another one? Straw man, slippery slope. And again, these are used to sort of convince you that the reasoning is correct. If you can identify the fallacies, then you know that there's a weak argument there. It's critical thinking, basically. And then we would just go into all evidence. And this is where, if it's for a journalism class, and even for any class it makes sense, is what kind of evidence are they using in the reasoning? Is it a statistic? So you would go through some of the basic issues with deceptive statistics. What was the methodology? Are they using the everything is going up statistic? What parameters do you have to look at to analyze a statistic? We did polling, which I got a lot of help from Stony Brook. What are some of the tricks people use to use a poll in their arguments? Case studies. What are the pitfalls of a case study? An analogy. What do you have to research to understand whether an analogy is an effective form of reasoning? Intuition even comes into it. And this book sort of breaks down all the different kinds of evidence that people use. And then after they go through all those steps, it's what are some rival causes? And the whole point of the class is, we use different videos, we use different kinds of examples from the news media, policy papers, press releases, and they're supposed to engage in this kind of activity in everything that they read. And I emphasize to them that you can't be a critical thinker on everything you read, or you'll never walk out the door. But if you're going to buy anything, you better do this, because you might pay $2.99 for an Apple iPod when you could have paid $50 for a regular MP3. If you're a reporter and you're dealing with a press conference or a policy document, you're obligated to do this with everything. And it'll take you 3 times longer than just reading it, but this is what, I just sort of explained, this is what journalists do, and this is what people who are smart do. And to protect yourself, because as like this sort of book emphasizes, life has become sort of a game of strategy, of people always trying to sell you something. And it's either an idea or a product, or I wrote a book on con men, or there's like a lot of con artists out there. They're usually people who you know.
What's the title of your book?
Provenance. It's an art forgery book. And it's fun. The class was fun, I thought. Well, for me, and hopefully for them. So that was sort of the basic structure.
Wow. I got about 30 million questions about your course, but thank you.